Celebrities helped vote in the communist New York City mayor, Zohran Mamdani. Now they can't afford to even live in the city, in the Big Apple. That's right, movie stars are moving out because Manhattan renting prices now costing more than $100,000 per year on average. Not to own anything, just to rent a very tiny apartment. And that means the stars can't afford it anymore. It's a great day. It's a groovy day. And folks, welcome back. Thank you for coming our way. Somewhere sunny USA is where we're streaming from. And the studio is glistening because you're listening to what we have to say. Truth with a capital T every single time as best we can. Click that like button and let's dive on in. Even celebrities cannot afford to live in New York City anymore. And the crazy plans of one communist mayor, Zohran Mamdani, doomed from the get-go. Right here, we've got it from Manhattan-torian? I don't even know. What is it? Anyway, .com says the fantasy land of New York City's discount grocery stores. This is a fascinating article. It goes on to talk about how this is going to fail epically. This grocery store idea of Mamdani, this communist idea that they're going to have government-run grocery stores that sell everything at 30% off. If we go here, I'll show you what it says. If you can buy something cheaply and immediately turn around and sell it for more, talking about the idea that people can buy these groceries for 30% off. If you can buy something cheaply and immediately turn around and sell it for more, chances are you will do it. Why shouldn't you? Is there something wrong with that? This is completely normal and pervasive human behavior. Goes on to say, there's no way these grocery stores work because as soon as you sell stuff for 30% off, everybody is going to go in there and buy out the store and then turn around and sell it on eBay or whatever, wherever you can, like sell it, right? It says it will be more than a year before any of Mayor Mamdani's grocery stores actually open, but it's easy to predict that things will not go as they plan. The options are limited. One, allow anyone to buy as much as they want, in which case enterprising, we'll change that because that's almost impossible to say. Enterprising, Lou, you know how to say that one?
I don't see it.
Arbitrageurs.
Oh, arbitrageurs, yes.
Arbitrageurs. Okay, we got it. See, I should have just tried it and said, I knew that all along. We'll quickly buy all the discounted goods and greater subsidies will be needed to keep the stores stocked, with essentially all the subsidies ending up in the pockets of the resellers and few, if any, discounted groceries available for the intended beneficiaries. Or you could immediately impose tight rationing, only to watch clever resellers quickly find ways to get around the rules. Or you could have perpetually empty store shelves, like all the other socialist grocery store efforts of the past.
Yeah.
This is completely doomed, but the amount of money that's going into these grocery stores is crazy. And so what do you have to do in order to generate the kind of money to do these kinds of crazy things? We have to raise taxes. And so millionaires are leaving in droves, and that includes the celebrities. From NTF, what do we got here, folks? Well, $12 billion worth of millionaires are gone. They've left New York. It says, even as New York Governor Kathy Hochul begs millionaires to return from Florida, New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani is busy coming up with new ways to tax the rich. $12 billion. Had New York's millionaire share not dropped and instead remained steady at 2013 levels, New York would be bringing in at least $12 billion more in revenue each year. And you can see here the millionaire percentages that are dropping from New York. The last data we have is from 2022, but we suspect that dropped precipitously,
And
which
they take their
means
employees with them.
right. So the millionaire percentage in New York was something like 13% in 2010. And by the way, it's easier now than ever to be a millionaire because of inflation. That percentage has dropped in spite of that from 13% to the last measurement was below 11%. I'm betting now that this is probably below 8%. I'm betting it's 7% and change. Now, folks, we're not here to stay on New York. I mean, we're not a New York channel. But what if I told you that New York is now getting to the point where celebrities and famous people can no longer afford it? New York, that is the second biggest media market in the country and may no longer be so much longer. New York has reached a point where unless you are an A-lister, you can no longer afford to rent a place in Manhattan so that you can do your job when you need to go to New York to do your job. This is the article. It's out of the New York Post. It's just breaking by Mary K. Jacob. Manhattan rents reach all-time high of $6,655 on average per month amid Mamdani's rent freeze and pied-à-terre tax threat. In other words, despite Mamdani promising that he was going to freeze rent, despite Mamdani saying that he's going to do all these taxes and stuff, rent has reached an unheard of high in Manhattan. Now, what does that mean? It means that to rent an apartment in Manhattan, the cost is now on average more than $100,000 per year. Not to own it, not to buy it, to rent it for a year. And worse, this is the average. By the way, that's up 6% from last July when it was $5,295. And May and July and June of the prior record was $5,125. So it says, Manhattan renters, brace yourselves. The average price tag for a place to live just hit a jaw-dropping $6,655 a month, an all-time high according to fresh data from Corcoran Sunshine Marketing Group. Corcoran. That's a 10% jump. Thank you, Lou. Corcoran. 10% jump under Mamdani. Lou, it's... Go ahead, Culture. But the point here is it's unaffordable. It's unaffordable for celebrities even now to live in New York.
But I have a question. Does that mean 12,000 millionaires have left New York?
You talking about where were we talking about the drop in millionaire percentages?
Yeah. If you lose $12 billion worth of...
No, this is way worse. So it's $12 billion in revenue. So the percentage that they pay to New York, which would be, I don't know, 10%, 15%, whatever the percentage of they would pay in taxes, is worth $12 billion in revenue per year.
Wow.
And I will remind you that New York City has an income tax, let alone the state.
Yeah.
Right.
So literally more than 12,000 people, let's say if I were doing my simple math, left because they didn't want to be charged the millionaire tax? And they think that this is a sustainable thing?
I don't think it's sustainable. Here's the thing. Lou, let me intro this to you. It says New York's rental vacancy rate has cratered to just 1.49%. The tightest it's been since 1968 and down from 1.57% previously. Experts consider anything under 5% a landlord's market. It says it's far worse than that. Separately, state registration data self-reported by landlords shows about 57,000 rent-stabilized apartments sat empty. Citywide in 2025, roughly 5.6% of the regulated stock and up from 3.7% a decade earlier. So, Lou, the stats are strange, I would say. Your thoughts on...
It's because of rent control. You see?
Please.
Because people are afraid to move because wherever they move is going to be so much higher. And that's why the occupancy or the availability is low, because you can't move because you can't afford to move anywhere because suddenly you lose the benefits of rent control of where you are. You see?
Sure.
So anyway, I have actually been to a People's Republic. I think some of you have, but I remember it was Christmas and New Year's of 71 when I first went to the Soviet Union. And I went to go get breakfast. And you went to this store, and this was right on the main drag, about 6 blocks down from the Kremlin. And it was this gorgeous old Tsarist palace. So it was all, marble and beautiful place. But it was basically a bakery, okay? And so you went to get a roll and a cup of coffee. You stood in line, first of all, in the roll line. And you went up there and said, I want a roll. And they said, that's 3 kopecks or whatever it was. And you gave them 3 kopecks. Now, they gave you a 3 kopeck ticket, which a second employee had to stamp on both sides with a rubber stamp. And now you got in a third line and turned in your ticket to get your roll. And you did that for coffee, and you did that for meat, and you did that for produce, and you did that for everything. So it was a full employment economy. But my God, who has time like that? Answer, people in the People's Republic. It's a nightmare. It's a nightmare.
So, Lou, the average income of a B-tier celebrity right now, okay? So the vast majority, most people are not A-list celebrities. And really, most people are not even B-list.
Well, and they have agents and expenses and stuff. They don't, what's their net after their gross?
Right. But their average gross is $100,000 to $1 million per year. And that's based on the idea that $50,000 to $400,000 per project. So if you are a B-list celebrity, if you're that B tier, I don't see how you can afford to live in New York anymore, or at least not in Manhattan. And I don't see how it's possible. So you've now made it where only the super famous celebrities can afford to go to New York, and that's amazing. Like they're going to have to start getting hotel rooms instead of having a place, even if they have a project going on there, even if they know that they have multi-years of projects. As you say, out of that gross, they've got to pay all kinds of PR people. And
the hotel rooms are going up too, because the hotel has those expenses to cover.
Right, yeah. Right.
Well, now, if you're a landlord and one of your units comes vacant, you are not going to advertise that. You're going to eventually get to a point where, because of a rent-controlled situation, you're going to start combining units to increase the size and the scale and the scope of the rent that you can collect. So as units start to become vacant, as you can start to assemble units to make larger apartments, you change the market value of the rent. So now you're going to reduce housing even further, because that you're compelled to create larger units in buildings that in these rent control buildings. It's the only way to escape it.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So, Derek, here's the deal. It's going to cost $100,000 to rent a small apartment in Manhattan now. It does. And there's no guarantee. Well, you're going to get the living daylights taxed out of you as well. Because if you live in Los Angeles and you're going to have this second small apartment in Manhattan, that's going to get hit with this new tax that Mamdani's got. So if you compare that to anywhere else in the country, you can see why it becomes so much more, so much more affordable, so much more convenient for these operations, these productions, these studios to move anywhere else other than California and New York. I mean, it's mind-boggling. The average rent for a 3-bedroom unit in Nashville, Tennessee, where Paramount is thinking about moving, is $2,400 to $2,700 per month.
That's for how many rooms?
3-bedroom. Average. That's according to apartments.com. 3-bedroom apartment, average cost in Nashville. Now, of course, they're going to want something nicer. Fine, $10,000, right? That's still 1/10.
And if that's your residence, you pay no state income tax.
That's true.
Wow. Yeah.
So,
and that's the problem with California. Not only is it a difficult state to do business in just because it's very litigious, but it's also very expensive. And if you want to live here, you're going to have to shell out all kinds of money on housing, on travel, on your vehicle. And it's so much better just to move out of the state. David Ellison's going to save a ton of money just leaving California and moving it to Tennessee or Texas or wherever he's talking about moving to. He's going to save a ton of money, and the employees that come in will save a ton of money. Everybody's going to, I honestly don't understand. I bet he already had that thought process in the works a year ago when he bought Skydance. It's like, hey, why am I doing business in California? It's too expensive. Let me move to a cheaper state, and I'll save money on the taxes, and my employees will save money, and it's all the way around better. Okay, Hollywood's and production is leaving LA anyway. So what's rooting me to this state? Nothing. And now that the AG wants to do what he wants to do, it's even more of an incentive to leave. So yeah, I think it's just smart business at this point. Everybody's calling it blackmail. It's just smart business, just to where it's cheap.
People are finally aware of it. Remember a few years ago when Disney was going to move everything to Florida, and the employees were, I don't want to move to Florida. Now they might say otherwise.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So, Lauren, it's getting to the point now where these economies, it just doesn't make any sense anymore to be in New York. And it's sad because as we're, the idea of these grocery stores and paid, free childcare for everybody, all of this stuff is just kind of like ludicrous. We know the grocery stores are going to fail. We know that free childcare for everybody is like, how in the world can you even pull that off? And these are the kinds of systems that are being put into these places. It's essentially like empathy run amok, right? That's actually crushing the ability for these places like New York or Los Angeles to maintain their industries.
And among those industries, we noted last week what opened. Y'all Street, the Texas
in
Stock
Texas, Dallas, yeah.
Exchange.
I take exception to saying it's empathy run amok, because people are using empathy as an excuse. It's really about power. And the downside to all of this is that when you hollow out these communities, when the people who can afford to pay for all of these nonsense ideas uproot and go away and leave behind the people who cannot afford to then take up the taxes that they will have to take up, you hollow out the entire city. It becomes another Detroit, and there is no way for people to escape it. Crime escalates, violence escalates. There's nothing empathetic about any of this. But unfortunately, we have turned a number of people's brains to mush. And despite all evidence that you can provide, despite the lessons of history, they still think somehow this time it's going to work. And the truly unfortunate thing is that you're going to lose some crown jewels of the United States, and there's going to be follow-on effects of that as you have people who are able to exit leave. Hopefully, they will have learned their lesson, but if they haven't, they're going to bring this same poisonous ideology to wherever they are and spoil that place too. So we got problems. There's nothing good about this.
Lou, I wanted to ask you because I think people in the chat may have been confused when I was talking about the value differences between Nashville and New York City. And Nashville, my understanding is the fastest growing city in America right now. It's often in a race with Austin, Texas. So it's not like it should be cheap. But Lou, what I'm getting at here is not only is there financial difference in the value of that, but also the size of the apartments. Manhattan versus Nashville is probably gargantuan.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no doubt about it. I mean, I remember I had a dear friend who was a conductor for Broadway shows, and he had this wonderful apartment in New York. It was a phone booth.
Right.
And
1,000 square feet is impressive.
Yeah, exactly. It looked like one of those Japanese hotels where you sleep in a pod almost. Pretty close, really pretty close. It was a loft apartment, which meant that the kitchen had the bed loft above it and a ladder. And
let me tell you, I don't want a bed above the kitchen. I'll pass on that one for obvious reasons.
One big room, with a floor stuck into it for the bedroom loft. But and again, the cost of everything else goes down. Remember, as I said to you guys way back when we were discussing the strikes in Hollywood, when a grip isn't working or a craft service guy or anybody. Neither is their dog walker, neither is their dry cleaner, neither is their local bodega, whatever. It ripples through the whole economy because these are company towns for these industries, and all of the support people go by the wayside as well.
Well said, Lou. Celebrities
There's
can't
another
afford.
example. Wonderful Chicago, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Well, more people killed there like in the last month than have been killed in the whole Iranian war on our side or something like that. And when you talk to, listen, I have dear friends who live there, and I was part of a group. There's this thing called the Great American Loop where you take a boat and go around. And I said, Chicago scares me on that trip. And they said, oh, don't worry about it. And they literally said, well, they only kill each other in those bad neighborhoods. Want to bet? Want to bet? Everybody's looking for a way to dumb it down to the point where they are somehow absolved of any responsibility or any impact. It doesn't work that way. The whole place goes down the tubes.
That's right. Celebrities can't afford to be in the places that they have changed. Will they change new places they go to? That's the question. And folks who live in those locales are saying, don't bring it here. Don't bring Mamdani's brand of communism to our shores. You know, when you stick around for the entire video, it really does help the channel. And we're so appreciative of that, ladies and gentlemen. Imagine that you would stick around and hear everything we have to say. The studio is glistening because you're listening each and every day. If you're not yet subscribed, well, you should be. And click that like button. Until the next time, keep learning, keep growing, and as always, keep having fun.